You meditate, you journal, you've said all the right affirmations, you've cried in all the right places. But deep down, you're still not okay. You're calmer, but not freer. You're more aware, but still afraid of being truly seen. What if you're not healing? What if you've just learned how to hide better? Maybe the pain that's still there is exactly where the real healing is waiting to begin. You know that feeling, don't you? When someone asks how you're doing, and you smile and say, "I'm great actually, I've been working on myself." But inside, there's still that familiar ache, that quiet desperation dressed up in spiritual language. Today, we're going to talk about something most people in the healing space won't tell you, something that might make you uncomfortable. But if you're tired of performing wellness while still feeling empty inside, stay with me. Because what I'm about to share might be the most honest conversation about healing you've ever heard. Healing has become a performance. Peace has become a product. And awareness has become just another shield. You've replaced chaos with control, replaced reactivity with restraint. But you still flinch when love gets too close. You still armor up the moment someone sees too much. A man who is possessed by his shadow is always standing in his own light and falling into his own traps, living below his own level. Carl Jung, you're not broken, but you might still be ruled by a shadow dressed in spiritual light. Let me tell you about Sarah. She came to me after 3 years of intensive therapy, meditation retreats, and energy healing sessions. On paper, she was the picture of someone who had done the work. She could regulate her nervous system, set boundaries, and speak fluently about trauma responses. But she sat in my office and whispered, "I feel like I'm performing my own healing. I know all the right words, I do all the right practices, but I still feel empty, like I'm watching my life from behind glass." Sarah had learned to manage her symptoms so well that she'd forgotten to actually feel her feelings. She'd become a master at containing her pain rather than transforming it. This is what I call sophisticated hiding, when we use the language and tools of healing to create a more elegant prison. We trade chaos for control, but we also trade aliveness for safety. The shadow in Jung's work represents the parts of ourselves we've rejected, repressed, or refused to acknowledge. It's not evil. It's simply human. But when we try to heal by only focusing on the light, by only cultivating the positive aspects of ourselves, we leave the shadow to run the show from the basement of our psyche. If this is hitting close to home, I want you to pause for a moment. Take a breath. Notice what's coming up in your body right now. Don't try to fix it or understand it. Just notice. Because recognition is the first step toward real healing. And real healing isn't pretty, it's not marketable, and it definitely doesn't fit on a vision board. You say, "I'm fine," but your body still holds the memory. You smile, but you avoid eye contact when someone asks the real questions. You've learned how to manage your triggers, but you haven't let them transform you. You've become a master at looking healed while hiding the ache. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Carl Jung, including calling it healing, when it's actually hiding. Here's what sophisticated hiding looks like in real life. You meditate every morning, but it's become a way to bypass your anger rather than understand it. You sit on your cushion and breathe through your rage, telling yourself you're processing it, but you've never actually asked why it's there, what it's protecting, what it needs you to know. You've learned to breathe through difficult emotions instead of breathing into them. You practice gratitude religiously, but you use it to shame yourself out of feeling disappointed or hurt. The moment you start to feel genuine sadness or frustration, you immediately counter it with, "But I should be grateful for," as if your pain is somehow ungrateful, as if being human is somehow unspiritual. "I should be grateful" becomes another way to avoid the messy, complicated truth of your human experience. You've perfected the art of radical self-love, but you use it to avoid accountability. Every criticism becomes someone else's projection. Every consequence becomes their inability to hold space for your growth. You've weaponized self-love to avoid ever having to actually look at your impact on others. You collect healing modalities like trophies: breathwork, somatic therapy, plant medicine, energy healing, sound baths, crystal therapy, chakra balancing. But you approach them like a consumer trying to fix a broken appliance rather than a human being learning to be fully alive. You're always seeking the next technique, the next breakthrough, the next level of healing, because staying busy with healing means you don't have to actually be present to what you're feeling right now. You've learned to speak the language of trauma-informed relating, but you use it to control conversations. Instead of having genuine, messy, human interactions, you manage other people's emotional experiences. "I can see you're triggered right now" becomes a way to avoid your own discomfort with conflict. Jung spoke about individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, integrated shadows and all. But there's a trap he calls inflation, where we identify with the healer, the awakened one, the person who has done the work. This inflation is just another form of ego protection. When you're inflated, you start to believe that your healing journey makes you special, that your awareness makes you superior, that your practices make you more evolved than others. You begin to see yourself as the therapist in every relationship, the conscious one, the one who's further along the path. Let me share another story that illustrates this perfectly. Marcus spent years in men's groups learning about sacred masculinity and emotional intelligence. He'd done ayahuasca ceremonies, completed multiple therapy intensives, and could speak beautifully about vulnerability and presence. He taught workshops on conscious communication and had hundreds of followers on social media who looked up to him as a model of evolved masculinity. But in his intimate relationships, Marcus used his spiritual growth as a weapon. When his partner expressed hurt or frustration, he'd say, "I can see you're triggered right now. I'm going to hold space for your healing process." When she wanted genuine intimacy, he'd respond with therapeutic language that kept her at arm's length. When she asked for simple human connection, he'd offer spiritual concepts. Marcus had learned to perform emotional availability while remaining fundamentally unavailable. He'd learned to use the language of depth to avoid actually going deep. He wasn't healing his intimacy issues. He was intellectualizing them. He was using spiritual concepts to maintain the very emotional distance he claimed to be healing. His partner eventually left him, and she said something that shattered his spiritual identity. "I don't want to be your client. I don't want to be your spiritual project. I want to be loved by a human being, not managed by a healer." Shadow work isn't optional. It's the raw, uncomfortable process of being honest with yourself about the parts you still judge, suppress, or ignore. Right now, ask yourself, what am I trying to fix about myself instead of understand? Notice the difference between those two approaches. Fixing implies something is broken. Understanding implies something is human. Shadow work means getting curious about the parts of you that you've labeled as bad or wrong or unspiritual. Your anger, your neediness, your jealousy, your desire for control, your fear of abandonment, your tendency to manipulate, your capacity for cruelty, your pettiness, your selfishness. These aren't bugs in your system to be eliminated. They're features of your humanity trying to tell you something important. But here's the thing about real shadow work. It's not comfortable. It doesn't feel good. It can't be Instagram-ed or turned into a before and after story. It's messy and recursive, and sometimes it feels like you're getting worse before you get better. There are no pretty before and after photos for shadow work. There's just the slow, humbling process of discovering how human you actually are. I want you to try something. Think of a quality you judge harshly in others. Maybe it's selfishness, or neediness, or being too emotional, or being controlling, or being fake. Now, get honest. Where does that same quality live in you? What would happen if you got curious about it instead of rejecting it? What might it be trying to protect or express? And this brings us to the most uncomfortable truth of all. The scariest part of healing isn't the pain you'll have to feel. It's the person you'll have to stop being. Because real transformation isn't addition, it's subtraction. It's not becoming more. It's becoming real. And becoming real means letting die the version of yourself that you've spent your whole life trying to perfect. The scariest part of healing isn't letting go of the pain. It's letting go of the version of yourself that pain helped you survive. As real healing feels like death. The death of who you thought you needed to be. The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. Carl Jung, you can't fake your way through this. You must choose to look and not turn away. Let me be brutally honest with you about what real healing actually looks like. It looks like sitting with the part of you that manipulates people for love and not immediately trying to fix or shame it into submission. Instead, you get curious. You ask it, how long have you been protecting me? What are you afraid will happen if you let go? What did you learn about love that made manipulation feel safer than vulnerability? It looks like recognizing that your empath identity might actually be a sophisticated form of codependency, that your sensitivity to others' emotions isn't always a gift. Sometimes it's a way to avoid feeling your own. Sometimes your ability to read the room is actually hypervigilance left over from childhood, when your survival depended on managing other people's emotional states. It looks like admitting that your spiritual practice has become another addiction, a way to chase the high of feeling evolved while avoiding the boring, difficult work of being consistently present to your ordinary human life. You can become addicted to transcendence, to breakthroughs, to feeling special and chosen and awakened. It looks like acknowledging that part of you doesn't want to heal, because being wounded has become your identity. You've gotten so much attention, so much care, so much special treatment for your sensitivity, your trauma, your deep feeling nature, that healing would mean losing your claim to being special. Jung understood that psychological transformation follows the same pattern as death and rebirth. There's a dissolution phase where everything you thought you knew about yourself becomes fluid and uncertain. This isn't pathology. It's how the psyche reorganizes itself at a deeper level. But here's what nobody tells you about this process. It's terrifying. Your ego, the part of you that's been running the show, keeping you safe, maintaining your image, starts to panic when it realizes it might not be needed anymore. It will do everything in its power to maintain control, including convincing you that you're going crazy, that this whole healing thing is dangerous, that you were better off before. Here's what nobody tells you about this process. You're going to grieve. You're going to grieve the simplicity of when you believed you could fix yourself with the right technique or the right teacher or the right breakthrough. You're going to grieve the story you told yourself about why you suffered. You're going to grieve the version of yourself that got love and attention for being wounded, for being sensitive, for being special because of your pain. You're going to grieve the relationships that were built on your shared dysfunction, your mutual spiritual seeking, your collective identity as conscious people who were different from everyone else. You're going to grieve the community that formed around your healing journey because as you become more genuinely yourself, you might not fit there anymore. You're going to grieve the hope that someone else could heal you, that the right therapist, the right guru, the right ceremony, the right relationship could finally fix what's broken inside you. You're going to have to face the terrifying realization that no one is coming to save you, and that the savior you've been waiting for is you. Not the perfect version of you, not the healed version of you, but the messy, human, imperfect you who exists right now. Because here's the terrifying truth. Part of you doesn't want to heal. Part of you has built an entire identity around your pain, your sensitivity, your trauma. Who will you be if you're not the wounded healer? Who will you be if you're not special because of how much you've survived? Who will you be if you're just ordinary? This is what Jung called the second half of life, when achievement and acquisition give way to meaning and authenticity. But you can't step into authenticity while still clinging to the false self you created to survive the first half. You can't become who you really are while still performing who you think you should be. If you're feeling raw right now, if something in you is resisting what I'm saying, if there's a voice in your head saying, "This is too intense," or "This doesn't apply to me," that's actually a good sign. It means we're getting close to something real. Consider subscribing if these deeper conversations resonate with you. We're just getting started, and we're going to go even deeper. Real healing means admitting that the coping mechanisms that saved you are now limiting you. The hypervigilance that kept you safe in childhood is now keeping intimacy at bay. The perfectionism that earned you love is now exhausting your soul. The people-pleasing that helped you belong is now betraying your authentic self. The spiritual seeking that gave your life meaning has now become a way to avoid living your actual life. And here's the part that makes people run away from real healing work. You're going to have to feel it all, not manage it, not transcend it, not spiritually bypass it. Feel it. Feel the rage you've been meditating away. Feel the grief you've been gratitude practicing out of existence. Feel the terror you've been affirmationing into submission. Feel the emptiness you've been filling with workshops and retreats and healing sessions. Think of a coping mechanism you've been proud of. Maybe your emotional intelligence, your ability to hold space for others, your strength in crisis, your capacity to see the bigger picture, your talent for helping others heal. Now ask yourself, how might this strength also be limiting me? What would I be afraid to lose if I softened this pattern? What would I have to feel if I weren't busy taking care of everyone else? The woman who prides herself on being low maintenance might discover she's actually afraid of having needs. The man who's known for his wisdom and perspective might realize he uses insight to avoid intimacy. The person who's always positive might find they're terrified of their own darkness. The healer who's always available for others might be avoiding their own need for care. This isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more honestly yourself. But that means letting go of the edited version, the curated version, the version that got you love and approval and a sense of belonging in a world that felt dangerous. And once you've seen how you've been hiding, once you've felt the grief of who you thought you were, once you've let that false self begin to die, then, and only then, can the real work begin. You don't need more answers, you need more honesty. The moment you stop fixing and start feeling, the real work begins. And no, it's not easy. It never was. Shadow work is the path of the heart warrior. Carl Jung, this path isn't for the performative, it's for the brave. So what does real healing actually look like? What does it mean to stop hiding and start healing? It looks like this. You're in a conversation with someone you care about, and instead of immediately going to your toolkit of communication skills and boundary-setting language, you pause. You notice the familiar urge to control the outcome, to manage their reaction, to be the conscious one in the relationship. And instead, you tell the truth, not the spiritual truth, not the wise truth, not the evolved truth, the messy, human, vulnerable truth. I'm scared you're going to leave if I'm not perfect. I don't know how to need people without feeling ashamed. I'm angry and I don't know why, and that terrifies me. I've been using my spiritual practice to avoid feeling how lonely I am. Real healing is learning to have a relationship with your pain instead of trying to eradicate it. It's understanding that your anxiety isn't a malfunction, it's information. Your depression isn't a defect, it's a response. Your anger isn't a problem to solve, it's energy that needs direction. Your neediness isn't something to transcend, it's your humanity asking to be acknowledged. Jung developed a technique called active imagination, dialoguing with the different parts of your psyche as if they were separate beings. Instead of trying to get rid of your inner critic, you have a conversation with it. Instead of suppressing your needy child self, you ask what it needs. Instead of shaming your angry part, you get curious about what it's protecting. Here's what this might sound like in practice. Instead of, "I need to stop being so anxious," try, "Anxiety, I notice you're here. What are you trying to protect me from? What do you need me to know? What would happen if I listened to you instead of trying to make you go away?" Instead of, "I should be over this by now," try, "What part of me still needs attention around this experience? What am I still trying to understand or integrate? What if this pattern is here to teach me something I haven't learned yet?" Instead of, "I need to let go of this anger," and try, "Anger, what boundary of mine has been crossed? What do you need me to know? What action are you asking me to take? How have you been protecting me, and what would I need to feel safe enough to soften you?" This isn't positive thinking or spiritual bypassing. This is developing a mature relationship with the full spectrum of your human experience. It's treating your emotions as wise messengers instead of problems to be solved. Jung wrote about the Yuan-She, wounded healer. The idea that we can only truly help others heal from wounds we've genuinely faced in ourselves. But the wounded healer isn't someone who has transcended their wounds. It's someone who has learned to be in conscious relationship with their wounds, to let their wounds teach them about compassion and humanity. Pause the video for a moment and try this. Think of an emotion you've been trying to fix or manage. Instead of seeing it as a problem, imagine it as a wise part of you trying to communicate something important. What might it be trying to tell you? What would change if you started listening to it instead of trying to make it go away? But here's what's beautiful about this process. Once you stop fighting with yourself, once you stop trying to be anyone other than who you are, something profound happens. You begin to relax into your own skin. You stop performing for an invisible audience. You stop checking to see if you're doing life right. You stop needing to prove that you're healed or evolved or conscious. And this is when people notice something different about you. Not because you've become more perfect, but because you've become more real. There's a quality of presence that comes from not hiding from yourself. There's a kind of peace that comes from accepting your own humanity. There's an ease that comes from no longer trying to be anyone other than who you are. People can feel when you're not performing anymore. They can sense when you're not trying to manage their impression of you. They can tell when you're genuinely present instead of strategically spiritual. And that authentic presence, that's what creates real connection, real intimacy, real love. For the next week, try this experiment. Instead of immediately fixing or managing difficult emotions when they arise, get curious about them. Ask, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What does it need? How is it trying to protect me? What would happen if I listened to it instead of trying to make it go away? Real healing doesn't make you invulnerable. It makes you responsive instead of reactive. It doesn't eliminate your triggers. It helps you understand what they're pointing toward. It doesn't make you perfect. It makes you human. It doesn't fix you. It frees you to be yourself. And here's the paradox. The more honestly you face your own shadows, the more compassion you have for others. The more you accept your own messiness, the less you need others to be perfect. The more you stop performing your healing, the more authentic connection becomes possible. The more you embrace your humanity, the more divine you become. Because authentic connection with yourself and others, that's what healing is actually for. Not to fix you, but to free you to love and be loved more fully. You thought healing would make you more perfect. It didn't. It made you more human. You thought it would remove the pain. Instead, it taught you how to breathe inside it. No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Carl Jung, you don't ascend by escaping your darkness. You rise by integrating it. So here we are, at the end of this conversation, but really at the beginning of something much more important, your relationship with your whole self. Real healing isn't a destination you arrive at. It's not a state of perpetual bliss or unshakable peace. It's a dynamic, ongoing process of staying awake to your own humanity while refusing to use that humanity as an excuse to harm yourself or others. It's learning to hold both your light and your shadow with equal tenderness. It's developing the capacity to feel deeply without drowning, to love fully without losing yourself, to be present to pain without being consumed by it, to acknowledge your needs without becoming demanding, to set boundaries without building walls. Jung wrote about the transcendent function, the ability to hold opposing forces within yourself without immediately needing to resolve the tension. This is psychological maturity. Being able to be both strong and vulnerable, both independent and connected, both discerning and compassionate, both human and divine. Here's what integrated healing looks like in daily life. You can feel anger without becoming destructive. You can experience sadness without falling into despair. You can acknowledge your needs without becoming demanding. You can set boundaries without building walls. You can be disappointed without becoming cynical. You can be hurt without becoming bitter. You can be afraid without becoming paralyzed. You're no longer trying to curate your internal experience to match some image of what a healed person should feel. You're simply present to what is, responsive to what's needed, and honest about what's true. You've given up the exhausting project of trying to be perfect and accepted the beautiful messiness of being human. And yes, you still have difficult days. You still get triggered. You still catch yourself falling into old patterns. But now there's awareness. Now there's a choice. Now there's self-compassion instead of self-attack. Now there's curiosity instead of judgment. Now there's acceptance instead of resistance. The woman I told you about earlier, Sarah, 6 months after our conversation, she called me and said, "I finally understand what you meant. I thought healing was about becoming someone who didn't hurt. But it's actually about becoming someone who can hold hurt without hiding from it. I'm still sensitive. I'm still deep. I still feel everything intensely. But now I don't need to perform my healing. I can just be human. Marcus, the man who used spiritual language to avoid intimacy, he eventually learned to say things like, "I notice I'm getting defensive right now, and I don't want to hurt you with that. Can we slow down so I can figure out what I'm actually feeling? I'm scared and I don't want to admit it, but I need your help understanding what's happening inside me." His relationships transformed when he stopped being the healer and started being human, when he stopped performing consciousness and started living it, when he stopped trying to be perfect and started being real. Here's how you know if you're truly healing versus just hiding better. Ask yourself these questions. Am I using my healing practices to avoid difficult feelings or to be present with them? Am I becoming more judgmental of others who haven't done the work, or more compassionate toward human struggle? Am I trying to fix myself or learning to understand myself? Am I using spiritual language to avoid accountability or to take deeper responsibility? Am I becoming more rigid in my enlightenment or more flexible in my humanity? Do I need others to see me as healed, or can I be a mess and still love myself? Am I trying to transcend my humanity or embrace it more fully? So if you're tired of pretending you're okay, if you're done performing peace, if you're exhausted from trying to be perfect, if you're ready to stop hiding behind your healing, then maybe, finally, you're ready. Not to fix yourself, but to face yourself. Not to transcend your humanity, but to embrace it. Not to become perfect, but to become real. And that is where real healing begins. If this conversation has stirred something in you, if it's opened a door you didn't know was closed, if it's made you question everything you thought you knew about healing, I want to invite you into deeper exploration. Subscribe to this channel, not just for more content, but for more truth. For conversations that don't wrap everything up in a neat bow, but that honor the complexity of what it means to be human. And if you're ready to stop hiding and start healing, leave a comment below. Not with platitudes or spiritual bypassing, but with honesty. What's one way you've been hiding from yourself? What's one area where you've been performing healing instead of actually healing? What would change if you stopped trying to be perfect and started being real? Because community isn't built on perfection. It's built on authenticity. And maybe, in sharing our truth, we can all stop feeling so alone in our humanity. Maybe we can create a space where it's safe to be human, where it's okay to be a mess, where healing doesn't have to look pretty or perfect or Instagram-worthy. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung, the question isn't whether you're worthy of healing. The question is whether you're brave enough to stop performing and start being. The universe isn't waiting for you to become perfect. It's waiting for you to become real. And that journey, from hiding to healing, from performing to being, from fixing to feeling, that's the most sacred work any of us will ever do. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your willingness to feel. Thank you for being human in a world that often asks us to be anything but. The healing begins now. Not when you're ready, not when it's perfect, but now, in this moment, with this breath, in this beautifully messy, gloriously human life you're living. You're not broken. You never were. You're just finally ready to stop hiding how beautiful you are. And that beauty? It's not in your perfection. It's in your humanity. It's in your willingness to feel, to struggle, to grow, to be real in a world full of masks. Until next time, welcome to the path of the heart warrior. Welcome to the journey of becoming who you truly are.